fucking frame rate loss. Gotta take a three-month break up here because I've overstressed my my throat and my lungs too badly, and the doctors have warned me. And so I'm using up the last of my carts here for a couple of months, and or sorry, for a couple more days, and then I got to take a break for a couple of months, but I don't go right back into it. They thought it might be cancer at first, but it wasn't. I had scarred some tissue on my larynx. Fucking clowns. I had scarred some tissue on my larynx and stuff this year, just screaming and vaping hash and you know, my GERD and acid reflux and all that. So got to take a break from the hash, but that's okay. I did recently stop for, I think it was like 2 weeks, and it wasn't too bad. That wasn't that long ago. That was like when I got the news, they thought I had throat cancer first. And they were like, you need to stop everything. And when I did for like 2 weeks, and then I saw the doctor, and they're like, no, you're fine. You just have overstressed your larynx, and you have scar tissue there. They showed me the picture of it. I don't think I have it here, or I would show you. It's like a little lump of skin about the size of a, you know, like a pinhead. Because like your vocal cords are like reeds and a flute. And it kind of looks like a vagina, kind of. It's like this web of a circle of web, and in the center, just like how a clitoris would be, I have like right where the clitoris would be on a vagina. Normally it would just be for your larynx. It's like a flap of skin, like little flap of skin. But right where the clitoris would be on a vagina, on the picture that they showed me of the pictures they got of it, they're like, this is scar tissue about the size of, you know, like a nail head, and it's bad. It's why your throat it's why you get the scratchy and all that. And they're like, you don't have to stop doing what you're doing, but if you want to keep your voice and not have severely depleted voice, you must stop for a bit and give it a break and let the scar tissue heal and stuff. And I was like, oh good, it can heal. And they're like, yeah, if you don't overstress it, it'll be all right. I've damaged my vocal cords. So you said, yeah, I used to be a 1 or 2 pack a day smoker. Yeah. You said I used to be a pack a day smoker. I quit that 10 years ago, but keep the chain smoking weed all day. Me too. Then I got into dabbing and have an electric nail. Me too. I was always about the hot dabs, but now I'm smoke free for the past 5 years. Me too. Fuck yeah, dude. Digital high five. Me too. Been, you know, I did vape tobacco up until 2022. So it has not been that long for me. It has been only a year and a half, but I'm done with tobacco for life. And I haven't reached 5 years like you, but I will. It's been like 18 months since I've even touched tobacco. So yeah, it's awesome not smoking. Yeah, that's the problem with all the hash stuff. I know that it's not as bad as what my previous habits were, which was like methamphetamine. Vapor will get your lungs pretty bad. You get liquid in your lungs and vapor and stuff, and cigarettes for 23 years, marijuana like harsh ass swag for the first 10 years that I smoked weed, and then we just graduated to hydroponic weed because the fucking swag was way too bad on your lungs. You know, it was just sticks and stems and seeds and shit. It's also not smoking. I can hold my breath for 140 seconds now, better than I used to when I was a kid. Yeah, definitely, me too. Without the cigarettes, I'm doing way better. I'm way healthier. I have a wheeze and a smoker's cough, so it sounds like this. It's like. You can hear it, but. It's better than it's ever been, believe it or not. I never thought I would be this bad, but I definitely was. Oh, it overlapped your chat here for a second. Oh, there we go. Yeah, it's good. Oh, Oh, the wings are so annoying. Why do I always park right next to a bird spawn? It's so annoying. Kill the bird. The wing sound is so annoying. Okay, let's go get to it. Fuel and water, or sorry, fuel and wood. Good. So, wait, was that? No, that was not it. The crab is good. Yeah, kill the crab. So I'm learning about how Danny Masterson, the actor from That 70s Show, he was the guy with the sunglasses there on the left side. Turned out to be a career rapist. And this video is about that. And the reason it's important, it's not very important that in and of itself. That's some TMZ bullshit, you know. But the reason that it's important is the Scientology Church had inducted him, that guy next to him, forget his name, Emmanuel or something like that, right? And then Laura Prepon and Mia Kunis are all Scientologists. And in the Scientology Church, they have like the biggest rule, and we're finding this out like 10 years later because of the people who have talked about it. The biggest rule in the Scientologist Church that you must obey, and I didn't know this until today. I've watched a lot of stuff about Scientology, but I couldn't put it down to what the causality was that caused all these problems and stuff. But it turns out that the Scientology Church, when L. Ron Hubbard like told them that the outside cops and the people of the outside world that weren't in the cult were called wogs in the Scientology Church, and so there was a rule in the Scientology Church, the number one rule that I didn't even know was a thing, was that Scientology members are not allowed to talk to outside police. They're not allowed by their church. This was mind-blowing to me when I caught this on this video this morning. I just happened to watch this video. And I was like, wait, the Scientology Church has banned its members from ever providing evidence in a court of law? And that is exactly what it is, yeah. And so all of the stars of That 70s Show knew that Danny Masterson was a rapist, but they were all Scientologists, so they were like under a religious oath to defend him to the media, to protect him. I mean, we knew they were all doing this, but we didn't know how really nasty and cursed it got, you know. And so this was a shocking thing to me, and I missed what you said here. Heard everyone knew too. He was even called out on a late night talk show years ago about it. Yeah. She played the interview. Conan O'Brien literally said to his face, I caught the clip on this video. I would go back, but I don't know where the clip is. We're like, I don't know, a few minutes in. We're like 24 minutes in. But there's this hilarious clip, Manu Sands. It's just crazy, where Conan O'Brien is opposite Danny Masterson, and he's like, I've heard about you. They're gonna catch you soon. And it was joking and laughter and that old good old boy like Hollywood stuff about like, you know, like protecting each other and shit. But Conan O'Brien literally says this to Danny Masterson as a joke, and Danny Masterson's like, oh yeah, I know they will. And that was also just frankly disgusting. Like, they're gonna catch you soon, and Danny Masterson's like, yeah, they will. I'm at 24 minutes. Let's see if I can catch the clip when Conan O'Brien. This made me laugh when I saw it. I was like, oh my god, Conan O'Brien straight up says it to his fucking face, right? I think it's at the end of this clip here or something like that. I don't know where it is. It's like, Conan O'Brien, where are you, Conan? Damn it, where was this? Somewhere in here is Conan O'Brien being like, they're gonna catch you soon, and he's like, yeah, they will. It's so fucked up. Where is it? I can't find it. Oh, make it. There it is. I saw it for a second. There it is.
Party. Danny gave them a crash course in how to avoid getting roofied. Nick said he thought it was strange.
So we'll go back 6 minutes because this is right about where it gets pertinent. And we'll run it from here because this is amazing. This blew my mind when Conan O'Brien is like tongue in cheek. He's like, oh, they're gonna get you soon. That blew my mind.
About roofies. Again, nothing absolutely wild, but I can see.
So he was infamous in the Hollywood scene for being a roofie expert because he had coached a bunch of Hollywood starlets as friends and fucking brethren and shit, that how to not get roofied, because he knew all this stuff about roofing people.
Especially the last one, why he wanted to say something just in case it's not going to really cause
So here's the Conan
to
interview.
say something. Well, that's what he thought anyway, because when somebody reached back out to him, it wasn't actually his old boss.
Oh, that wasn't it?
Netflix. It was actually Danny,
that wasn't it,
because the producer had immediately gone to Danny Masterson and assumed that Nick was trying to tell them something to help Danny, not against him. And the producer said, oh, get in touch with him. And Masterson ended up texting Nick in 2004. After the June 7th arraignment, Masterson remained free on a $3.3 million bail. The trial began on October 11th, 2022.
I just saw it.
There were a few key differences about the first and the second trial, and I'll explain those in just a minute. Masterson decided not to testify nor call witnesses.
I don't know where this is, but
both parties rested their cases on November 14th, 2022. And made their closing arguments the following day. The jury deadlocked after...
There was also some creepy shit, because apparently Mila Kunis's first kiss was with Kelso at the age of 14, and they didn't care that this 19-year-old was kissing a 14-year-old, and they set it all up through Hollywood, and they scripted it, and I guess, but it's not that normal for a 19-year-old to date a freshman. It's not that normal. It's not that common to see a freshman with a 19-year-old. I don't think that's very normal. So I don't know.
Instead of declaring a mistrial, the judge ordered the jury to resume deliberation the week after Thanksgiving. The jury remained deadlocked once deliberations resumed. Consequently, a mistrial was declared on November 30th, 2020.
He got a mistrial.
The jury foreperson said that the panel of 6 men and 6 women leaned towards acquitting Masterson on all counts because they found the testimonies of the complainants inconsistent. Most legal experts and people who followed the trial closely agree that the reason the jury became deadlocked was due to 2 key elements that were kept from the jury and the courtroom. One was the drugging of the 3 victims. That was not allowed to be mentioned in the first trial, and neither was Scientology, specifically the Scientology reports. Considering all 3 victims were members of the Church of Scientology, and due to Scientology's strict law of not involving the real-world authorities in Scientologist crime, the jury in the first trial were not shown that the victim reported the attacks to Scientology higher-ups over 20 years ago. This matter was allowed in the second trial, and the drugging was actually also allowed because the defense themselves opened that door during testimony. So we are going to discuss the trial now. Just 2 quick things going into the trial chapter that you need to know. There's 2 words on the screen, and I will be referring to those words as their initials, the R word and SA. This is just to do with YouTube. I'm sure people have heard this before. It affects the monetization, but also how the video is pushed out. If a video is not monetized, it is not put into YouTube and pushed out the same way, because YouTube looks at the video and thinks, well, I'm not going to make any money out of this, so why should I push it out when this video I am going to make money on it? And if you want to see how true that is, look at my video about the Duggars, because I didn't monetize those so I could speak freely. This is when I knew a lot less than I know now, and unfortunately this is just the way YouTube works. Because I've taken multi-month-long courses with people like Patty Galloway, who is all-knowing about YouTube, YouTube, just was in Forbes, worked for Mr. Beast, and that's just the way the algorithm works. One thing I will say is though, I do not do sponsorships on my channel. For me and my channel,
neither.
that's just not something I want to do. I think it affects the viewers' time, and it's not something you can opt out of with like YouTube Premium.
You should be able to. You should be able to, as a creator, I should be able to designate either a scripted ad in my video that they wrote and cut and that they want me to play, or I could do my own for them and provide my personality for them. But the people that were watching the video, if they're paying YouTube Premium, I want YouTube to cut that part of the video out. And I want the ads to be legally required to be separate from the video and sussed out by YouTube and sussed out by the creator. And I think if you're paying for YouTube Premium, you shouldn't ever see an ad on the platform. And so I'm struggling with this as a creator. One of the things they suggest you do about 2 years in, when you start to see like 5 viewership, 10 viewership, that kind of thing, is you're supposed to start petitioning sponsors to try to take care of your channel. You know, now I'm missing, I'm sorry, so my chatty is off, and I keep missing your chat notifications. I'm so sorry. My chatty died, and I missed what you said, man who stands. That is my fault, and I'm so sorry. Let me load my chatty so I can hear you talk. Now, why did I, I starved to death. Okay, that's not good. Oops. Okay, what did you say? Oh, sorry. Let me get to all of this because I'll forget. There we go. Okay. You said I had the chatty set up. I did it on stream. I checked it on stream, but nope. There we go. You said got here like Bill Cosby must be his mini-me. I sponsor my cats on my lap. Everyone who always wants a cat on their lap, then please call 100 cats on lap. Yeah, there you go. See, I sponsor cats on my lap too. I really like what you just said. Yeah. So, I mean, you know, if you want to make money doing this, you need a sponsor, but you need sponsors, but also, I don't know if I agree with what YouTube did to their platform when they made premium, but didn't make it possible for people to cut out the ads in their favorite streamers' videos. So, I don't know, but that's just me. Oops. Okay. Yep. And then you and there. I can't believe this base is intact. Did you break my mixing table? Yes, you did. Why did you break my mixing table, you fucking assholes? Oh. What's that guy doing? Oh! It was a good shot. Okay.
Really really want to put that in my content. And also, a lot of those things turn out to be scams. So this sort of content that I'm doing,
Yeah, a lot of those things do turn out to be scams. A lot of the ads that I see on streamers' channels and stuff turn out to be scams in the end, and it bothers me.
A lot of the time I don't want to be caught up in anything like that. And also, if I'm not talking about scams, I'm talking about stuff like this, where I don't want to go from talking about that and then be trying to sell you something. So that's just my opinion for my content and me. Everyone else is free to do whatever they want and whatever they deem necessary. But that's just also what I want to let you people know too. So
she's
we
beautiful.
don't have to go through sponsorships. So let's discuss the trial. There was something that happened between the two trials, and it was about the first trial. I didn't see this reported nearly anywhere, or well, actually nowhere in the mainstream media. The only person I saw really talking about this was Aaron Smith-Levin, who runs the channel Growing Up in Scientology. A lot of the information in my video I have got from Aaron's videos because he actually went to the trial and was there every day. And there was only 3 people that were in the court every day. So it was really difficult to get kind of a blow-by-blow of what went on in court because there was so few people that actually attended every day. But Aaron actually broke a story about the jury foreman in the first trial, who he had actually lied to get on the jury. And not only was he a former police officer that he didn't tell the court about, but he also had a son who was convicted of something very, very similar to Danny Masterson. It just, his crimes weren't against women, they were against children. And I'm sure that was a factor, given that he was the foreman as well, that severely affected the first trial. But we're going to discuss the second trial now, and after the trial section, we'll go into the sentencing, but also discussing the letters and everything that happened on social media with people like Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis. So the trial involved 3 accusers, 3 victims, and each of them was known by Jane Doe. So there was Jane Doe 1, Jane Doe 2, Jane Doe 3, and this is to do with Marion's Law in California, where they don't put the names of
Now
the
I can hear you.
victims.
Yay.
All of
I can hear you
the
now.
women
Be back in a few.
have
Gonna pick up the herbs.
identified
Okay.
themselves
See you in a bit.
media. One of them, Chrissy Bixler, who was Jane Doe 3, she was Danny Masterson's girlfriend for about 6 years, nearly the entire run of that 70s show, and she has always been open about who she was and which Jane Doe she was. She even was the one who did the interview with Leah Remini back in 2017. The other Jane Does are known as Jen B and Nisha. So if you hear me say Jen, Nisha, Chrissy, that's each of the Jane Does, and it's obviously all okay that their names are known and it's known which Jane Doe they were. Everything like that is completely open now. While there were 3 Jane Does who were actually the victims, accusers in this case, there were other women who were witnesses and referenced in this trial, and after the trial and during the trial actually, there was a lot more women that came forward and said they were victims of Danny Masterson. These are only women we know about, so I'm sure there are other women out there based on the statistics of how underreported SA crimes are. And at the time of this recording, there were approximately 17 known victims of Danny Masterson. So we're going to go through each of the women's stories, and I'll go through them the order that they went in trial, which is Jane Doe 1, Jane Doe 3, Jane Doe 2. And we'll go through basically the outline of their stories and a little bit of what happened in court,
Damn
and
it.
then just anything else that is deemed relevant.
I'm gonna go
One thing
to a
about
gas
Masterson
station and
is
die, I
he seems
guess.
to be incredibly arrogant, because anytime that he was going to the courthouse, I mean, there's multiple pictures on here, and I'll put them on the screen too, where he was arriving at the courthouse and
Oh, it's just
on
another TikTok
Instagram
day.
as if
Going
it
to the
was
courthouse for rape,
being
guys.
in a
Stay
restaurant. I think
fantastic.
he was even tagging the courthouse, certainly not giving the situation the respect it deserved. Jane
Asshole.
Doe 1 accused Masterson of SA and the R word in 2002 during their first sexual encounter. After that happened, she went to her superiors at the Church of Scientology, and she went in and basically told them what happened. She was sent into an ethics program, as Scientology believes that you are not a victim, that anything that happens to you is your fault. So they were basically saying, this happened to you, so you must have brought it on in some way, because there's no such thing as being a victim in Scientology. The Church of Scientology ethics officer afterwards told Jane Doe 1 to make peace with what happened, and made her complete an ethics program where she was taught she was responsible for the alleged crimes. There's a quote from Jane Doe 1 that says, "My understanding my entire life was that you can never be a victim. No matter what condition you find yourself in life, no matter how horrible, you are responsible. You created that." Jane Doe 1 also testified that Masterson raped her at the end of April 2003. Jane Doe 1 said she went over to her friend Bree Schaefer's house, and Bree Schaefer was actually Danny Masterson's assistant. You will hear about her a little bit later, as Danny has been using her to allegedly try and shield assets. She is also the wife of actor Michael Pena. Jane Doe 1 was friends with Bree. She went over to her house about 5 o'clock, and later that evening is when Masterson drugged and raped her. Masterson allegedly put something in Jane Doe's drink and then threw her in the jacuzzi. This is when Jane Doe 1 said that all she remembers is feeling extremely nauseous, and she was kind of blacking out and also just feeling really, really ill. Masterson carried Jane Doe 1 up the stairs. He put his fingers down her throat and made her vomit. She then was put in the shower by Masterson, who began touching her even though she was saying no. He then brought her into the bedroom when he put her on the bed, and she says she passed out. Then she woke up to the actor on top of her, and that's when he was raping her. She tried to struggle away from him, and that's when he went to his nightstand and pulled out a gun and told her to shut the fuck up. So why not go straight to the police? Well, as I said, Jane Doe 1 was a Scientologist. She was born in Scientology, raised in Scientology. Her whole family was Scientologists, and any ex-Scientologists I know or have even seen on YouTube or something like that, they all say that Scientologists on Scientologist crime should not go into the WOG world, which is the real world. They should not be going to the police and reporting things. Any Scientology on Scientology crime should be dealt with by Scientology. So Jane Doe 1 reported Masterson to her ethics officer, as she should. She told her mother. Her mother even wrote to David Miscavige and tried to get Masterson dealt with within Scientology. But Jane Doe 1 was getting nowhere, and even though she knew that this would cause her entire family to disown her, she would have to leave her life, leave her job. She was in her late 20s, and she would lose everything if she did this. But despite all of that, she went to the police because she heard about another victim, and she couldn't stand by and let this happen to yet another person. So she then went to the police, to the LAPD. A quote from Jane Doe 1 is as follows. Then one day in May 2004, I'm not going to say specifics. I'll say I was told about a girl named Lily, and it shook me to my core. And I had to say her name because that's what I was told, and that's what I decided to take a step that would destroy my life. I knew Danny wouldn't stop. Couldn't stop. I reported my rape to the LAPD in June of 2004, but before that there was a meeting I had to attend with my rapist. As Danny demanded in April 2004, I was forced by Scientology executive Kirsten Catano to sit across from him in a meeting at a conference table where he claimed he would apologize and make a promise to never repeat such a crime on any woman if he could hear me describe in detail how awful and violent the assault had been for me. I naively believed in the possibility of redemption, and I agreed to speak about the whole ordeal. However, it soon became clear this wasn't real. The defendant, along with his friend Luke Watson, turned the meeting into a mockery. They laughed and treated the situation as a big joke, showing no genuine remorse with no intention to change. The meeting ended with Jane Doe being pressured into signing a non-disclosure agreement and a confidential settlement agreement for $400,000, despite Jane Doe not asking for anything aside from Masterson not doing this again. A lot of ex-Scientologists have talked about how this payment is proof of Masterson's guilt because the Scientology Ethics Committee investigated everything that happened after Jane Doe went to them, and they never ever would have made a Scientologist, never mind a celebrity Scientologist who's the highest of the high, pay another Scientologist if they 100% didn't do what they were accused of doing. And obviously they had this meeting and it was being spoken about openly too. Jane Doe 1 even went through another ordeal with Masterson when he attempted to come at her through her 9-year-old daughter. Danny Masterson ended up going to a friend of his whose son was in the same class as Jane Doe 1's daughter. The kids were selling candy bars, and Masterson ended up purchasing all of the candy bars for a couple of $100 and told the kid, "I'll buy all your candy bars if you tell this little 9-year-old girl something." And the something was, tell her her mummy's a liar and that Danny Masterson didn't rape her. Of course, her 9-year-old daughter went home and didn't even know what that word meant. This all combined with learning there was another victim, and that's why she gave up her entire life and reported him to the LAPD. On top of the settlement, all the reporting to Scientology and the LAPD, Danny Masterson also put aside a small amount of money so that Jane Doe's daughter, the 9-year-old, could get some Scientology help, training, auditing, so that she could recover from this incident that Danny had inflicted on her. And that was set aside specifically in relation to what he said and everything that happened with Jane Doe 1. When Jane Doe 1 reported her attack to the LAPD, they decided not to pursue charges, which is not uncommon at all. So Jane Doe 1 lost everything. She had to move, start her life over. She had to find a new job, take her kids out of school, and her parents were only allowed to speak to her still because they had donated millions and millions to Scientology. But when everything started happening with the trial in the real world, Jane Doe's mom stopped speaking to her because she didn't want Masterson to be held accountable if it meant Scientology was being exposed and brought up in the media. So Jane Doe 1's mother still to this day does not speak to her, even though she wants Masterson held accountable. She wants him held accountable within Scientology. Another quote from Jane Doe 1 in regards to Danny's circle of friends. Testifying in court was not easy. From day one of his appearance in September 2020, he packed the halls with neighbors and so many people who covered for him. There was a South African man who assaulted me when I was a teen training in Scientology headquarters in Florida. He came to court despite my protests and he was aware of him. He did what he could to intimidate and harass me. And there was intimidation from the defendant's sister, Alana Masterson, in the bathroom. Jane Doe 1 also said that she fears retaliation from the Church of Scientology, and she's worried about her 3 children and all of the harassment that she's received, and that's why they are also suing and having a civil case, which we'll talk about in the final chapter.
It's fine, I'll go back.
3, Chrissy Bixler, Masterson's former girlfriend, has told the court Masterson was both physically and emotionally abusive. Recalling a night she allegedly woke up to him raping her. Chrissy B testified that she screamed at Masterson to get off me when she woke up to him assaulting her in 2001. She told jurors she met the actor in 1996 when she was an 18-year-old model who had just moved to LA. Chrissy converted to Scientology from Masterson, and a year into their relationship, she claimed he became sexually aggressive and physically and emotionally abusive, explaining it was normal to wake up to him having sex with her and alleging that the actor once dragged her across the floor by her hair when she refused to sleep with him. Chrissy also spoke about the terror campaign the Church of Scientology subjected her to. As she was taught to do, Chrissy went to the Church of Scientology after the in 2001, but she was told that it wasn't possible to rape a girlfriend, and it was her job to give Masterson whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. She was also told by the ethics officer no crime was committed. Chrissy reported Masterson to the LAPD in 2016. Masterson's defense team again tried to point out inconsistencies between Chrissy B's police interview and the testimony. The Church of Scientology told multiple media outlets that Chrissy B's allegations are categorically untrue. Jane Doe 2 was the final victim to testify, and she described a very, very similar incident to what happened to Jane Doe 1. She talked about going over to Masterson's house in 2003 and him giving her a glass of wine. She said that after the glass of wine, she went into the jacuzzi with him and started to feel very heavy and numb. Masterson then began kissing her, and she told him, "We're not going to sleep together." Just like Jane Doe 1, Jane Doe 2 was put in the shower, and that's when Masterson raped her. He then took her into the bedroom, and she was pleading with him not to do this, and then Masterson carried on raping her. She said that he was being so violent with her and so rough that she felt like a rag doll, and she was doing everything she could not to vomit. Jane Doe 2, just like Jane Doe 1 and 3, was a Scientologist at the time of the attack. She said Masterson was more important than her in the church, prompting her to recontextualize what had happened. She feared the consequences of reporting it to the church, which she said had discouraged her from reporting a previous from an ex-boyfriend. "I was gaslighting myself," she said, comparing Masterson to a predator and stating that she understood it was rape when she finally left the church. A quote from Jane Doe 2, "As an adult woman, you have plenty of time to see these distinctions between someone having affinity for you and someone targeting you as a piece of meat." I could go over examples like this for each of the Jane Does, but I don't want to make this video 5 hours long. So I'm going to use Jane Doe 2 as an example of some of the other evidence and verifications that they used, because yes, they all reported it to Scientology. There's those reports from 20 years ago, and even Jane Doe 1 went to the LAPD in 2004. Jane Doe 2 even brought in 4 witnesses who all said, yes, back in 2003, you told me this happened. and somebody I'm sure is going to say, oh, well, maybe it's her friends or family, maybe they're lying too. The web that you would have to create for all of these people to orchestrate all of them lying for 20 years about something that happened all that time ago, when they didn't even know that they were going to get to go to trial, because individually each of the charges, it's beyond the statute of limitations, right? So the only reason that they are able to try this is if they try all three of them together, because all three of them together could end up with a life sentence, and anything that has a life sentence doesn't have a statute of limitations. So in order for Downey Masterson to go to prison, he has to not only be found guilty on one of the charges, he has to be found guilty on at least two. So if the jury was to come back and say, oh, he's only guilty on Jane Doe 1 because she's the only one that went to the police, you know, way back 20 years ago, then he doesn't go to prison. So there has to be at least two of these three that end up in a guilty verdict. And again, they have to have 12 people sit and hear all this evidence, and those 12 people have to unanimously decide. So not only once do they have to unanimously decide that yes, this is what occurred, they have to decide twice. So it's 24 votes. So again, I'm going to go back now and talk about Jane Doe 2's witnesses, because even that whole, oh, her family and friends, they could lie to her. Actually, one of the people she brought forward absolutely hates her guts. So it's still actually crazy that this person is doing it. Nobody really knows why, because it's well known that they absolutely can't stand Jane Doe 2, and they've had a huge falling out. So it's very interesting that she's still
Was a fun fight.
willing to testify in court over this. Also, I think if you're trying to think like the jury, you could say, oh, well, maybe all these people that they're using as witnesses, a lot of them are ex-Scientologists. Maybe they all have an axe to grind with Scientology. But again, one of Jane Doe's witnesses kind of answers this, because one of the people that Jane Doe brought in as a witness, who said, yes, she told me about this back in 2003, this person was not a Scientologist. They've never been a Scientologist. They've never had any experience with Scientology. So it was interesting, because pretty much everybody else involved in this trial was at one time a Scientologist or still is a Scientologist. So the person who really dislikes Jane Doe 2 but still testified that yes, she told me this back in 2003, this woman is actually the ex-wife of Giovanni Ribisi, who I'm sure most people know him. He was in Avatar, he was in Sneaky Pete, Friends, he's been in loads of stuff, and he is a Scientologist. He's also very good friends with Downey Masterson. He has been friends with him since they were kids, and Giovanni Ribisi also wrote a letter.
There's another
of Downey
sociopath.
Masterson, which I will talk much more about in chapter 5.
Really, what she was there to testify to was, yes, Jane Doe 2 really did tell me these things at the time when they happened, and I'm here to say what she said. If
That's
you
Giovanni
are on
Ribisi.
that jury, there are 4 witnesses for Jane Doe 2. So again, today it was friend Rachel, Scientologist, Jordan Ladd, not a Scientologist. Tomorrow we're going to hear from her mom, former Scientologist, never really was. It's a weird one. I'll get into it more tomorrow. And then ex-wife of Giovanni Ribisi, Scientologist Mariah O'Brien. Now, even though Mariah is not a friend of Jane Doe 2, may or may not still be a Scientologist, I'm not totally sure, she is still going to come and testify that, yeah, we had a dinner, Jane Doe 2 was over at my house, she blurted out this thing that she said Danny had done this to her, and then I basically disconnected from her as a result. 4 witnesses who are going to testify that Jane Doe 2, at the time when this occurred, told me that this had occurred. How as a jury member could you possibly have any reasonable doubt that what Jane Doe 2 is testifying to really occurred when she told all these people?
So after all of the accusations, after all the Jane Does took the stand, all the witnesses, everybody else that was involved, there was Claire Headley, who was an expert witness for Scientology. She took the stand over the course of a day to explain a lot of the Scientology speak to the jury, because again, all three of them reported this to Scientology, so they had a lot of Scientology speak in the reports. And Claire was also able to explain to them
What?
about the fact that they would never want, like a Scientologist would never want things to be taken into the real world, and that's why all of the women didn't immediately just go to the police. That's why they first went to, you know, the Scientology ethics people. Another expert witness they had went over all of the statistics and all of the myths around SA and what victims are really likely to do,
Fucking
as
asshole,
opposed to what
sweaty piece of
culturally
shit.
people think happens when something like that goes down, and also how a lot of women cope with it and will try and rationalize it, and how they are much more
You can
likely
tell by
to
the way they
see
jump
those people
and
again,
act like
because
that.
is their
Fucking
primary
born loser.
rationalize it. And there's just a lot of other things that really, it's not as cut and dry as you are attacked in this way and you immediately go to the police. They are immediately charged and immediately held accountable, because there's so many cases. I mean, look on the internet, even ones with YouTubers, influencers, actors, they are very, very rarely held accountable, and that goes for everyday people too. It is extremely underreported, and the RAIN statistics, which I will put on the screen, which obviously all numbers, we have to look at how they got them, where they got them. These are a few years old, but you can generally get an idea from it how underreported and absolutely how unlikely it is for false reporting, and how unlikely it is for an actual person who commits SA to go to prison, because it is very, very unlikely for that to happen. In the first trial, there was another victim named Trisha V who testified about also being raped by Danny Masterson. Trisha V did not.
Oh, damn it.
testify in the
Come
second
on, man.
trial.
You can't get an item transfer done anymore. I constantly, I'm like, why didn't you do the item transfer? I told you to pick something up. And you're like, your UI with that is horrible
Catherine
now.
Day is the woman who was raped by Danny Masterson in 2000 at a wrap party for a movie in Toronto, Canada. I will not go through the details of her testimony. It was powerful. I'm pretty sure I saw the judge wiping away tears. I know I was. It was devastating.
When she was working on a movie in Toronto, she went to the wrap party and was invited to another wrap party that was going on in the same hotel. This wrap party was for Dracula 2000. Danny Masterson was at that party as he was in Dracula 2000. That night, Kathleen was raped by Danny Masterson.
Here's the next part of the testimony that I highlighted. By the time you left the hotel, did you know that you had been raped by Danny Masterson? And she said, well, I didn't leave the hotel that night. And there was some back and forth between her and her. Like, yes, but by the time you left the hotel, did you know that you'd been raped by Danny Masterson? And she goes, well, yes, but I did not know his last name, and I did not know who he was.
But at the time, she had no idea who Danny Masterson was. She didn't even know his last name. All she knew was that she was raped by someone named Danny.
All she knew was that she went to a wrap party for a different movie. She was then invited to an after party for Dracula 2000, and she happened to meet this guy named Danny who raped her.
Years later, she was sent a copy of the movie on DVD, and when she watched Dracula 2000, she saw the man who raped her. Down the road, she had a private phone call with Scientology reporter Tony Ortega, who then published her story without her permission.
But it became evident at this point in the testimony that the article Tony Ortega published about his phone conversation with Kathleen that he had with her about the attack was published without her consent and without her permission.
Kathleen then went to the police over the incident. After her story being put out in the media and going to the police, she was then asked to testify in the second trial. She took to the stand and told the jury about the night in Toronto when Masterson attacked her. This was a very, very tough chapter to get through, so we are going to go on and speak about the victim impact statements next chapter, and then chapter 5 we are going to go into the sentencing and also all of the letters and a big section on Ashton and Mila and what ended up happening with them and the backlash they received for not only their letters but for their horrendous apology video. When it came to the end of the trial, after the closing arguments, the jury then went into deliberation. Unlike my last video, which discussed the murder trial, this case had a much longer deliberation and it went on for over 6 days. Something that is very important to mention here is that in order for Danny Masterson to go to prison, the jury had to unanimously find him guilty on at least 2 of the 3 charges. So not only did they have to return 12 votes for guilty, they had to return 24 votes as each of the cases was looked at differently. So all 3 cases were reviewed separately, and if the jury returned just 1 guilty verdict, he would have got off. And it's also very important to know that the jury didn't know this going into deliberation. They didn't know that if they came back with just 1 guilty verdict, that this basically would have been for nothing. The jury unanimously agreed on 2 of the cases, Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 2. The third charge for Danny Masterson's former girlfriend, Chrissy Bixler, was deadlocked and the jury could not agree. But the final vote was 8-4 in favor of conviction. As I mentioned earlier, he did have to be found guilty on 2 counts, and because that parameter was satisfied, then the only thing left to do was to sentence him for his crimes. When they returned to court for the sentencing in September 2023, the judge actually allowed the 3 victims to read impact statements before she announced what Danny Masterson's sentence was going to be. I want to share some small segments from the impact statements because they are very powerful, and I have linked the entire statements in the sources below. As most regular viewers will know, I always list all my sources in the pinned comments, and there may actually start to be a Google Doc because, especially this case, there was a lot of sources needed. Again, I really implore you to read these if you have the time. We're going to go in descending order, so to start with Jane Doe 3, Chrissy Bixler. The judge very kindly allowed Jane Doe 3 to read her impact statement because she actually wasn't entitled to, because her count was hung. Some trials when this has happened, like recently with Harvey Weinstein, they actually didn't allow any of his victims who a mistrial was declared to read their statements. Jane Doe 3's statement speaks about her 6-year relationship with Masterson and the cycle of abuse that she endured. She spoke about Masterson asking her to tell him very detailed accounts of the trauma she had been through in her life. Scientology calls this finding someone's ruins. Once Danny Masterson found these ruins, she was trapped in the relationship with him, and he would reenact all of the traumatic experiences. Jane Doe 2, in her impact statement, she spoke about how she came forward about a year before the Me Too movement and how she found out there were other victims. She spoke about Danny's DJ name, DJ Donkey Punch, which, if you don't know what that is, it's just another thing that was very reminiscent of his crimes.
Speaking of which, I mentioned the donkey punch. How does that become your DJ name? Just because you can't believe people are going to have to say it?
Yeah, just because it was like, oh, I wonder if we can get this in the New York Times, and we did. And it was just, I started DJing in 97, 98, and like, you know, like DJ Manny Mathis, so you sort of all come up with something that's kind of funny. And mine was DJ Donkey Punch, which is a great name. This is also kind of like before the world of the internet and where the Facebook and Twitter, the whole thing, where everybody knows what everything means.
Right.
So for years,
Nobody
you
knows.
know, it'd be like, and interesting, DJ, not fun.
Ex-con,
You know, playing, you know, this isn't like the
And if you need more specifics, I would say look it up, but make sure when you look it up, you're looking it up on incognito mode for sure. And Jane Doe 2 spoke a lot about the 7 years that she was terrorized and harassed by Scientology and how her privacy was invaded. This is basically the past 7 years that investigation and trial has been going on. I do want to read a short quote from Jane Doe 2's letter. Obviously, all three statements were incredibly powerful, but this section in particular just was very well written. Jane Doe 2 said, "When you raped me, you stole from me. This is what rape is, a theft of spirit. You disfigured my life. You stole some crucial pieces of my self-worth and lessened my capacity for joy. You made every part of me turn on myself. Worst of all, for so many years after the rape, deformed my ability to trust others and to discern danger or goodness appropriately. Since life was now in the prism of hatred, shame, and fear, you forced me into that night, and you were someone in my community who I peripherally knew, that my close friends vouched for. Danny is such a great guy," they said. "This stolen trust part is the most crippling, because now my internal gauge was broken." A little bit later in the statement, she says, "You relish in hurting women. It is your addiction. It is, without question, your favorite thing to do. You've lived your life behind a mask as two people, but the real one sits here now for its reckoning. It never once dawned on you that you'd be held accountable. You've glided easily through your life as a depraved criminal without consequence for so long that you thought not only did the law not apply to you, but that karma had no eye on you either." And finally, Jane Doe 1's statement. As discussed in the trial chapter 20 years ago, Jane Doe 1, Jen B, did report her attack to Scientology and then to the police when she learned of another victim. Jen B explains in detail what happened when she reported Masterson to Scientology shortly after the attack, and also how awful Masterson was when Scientology was investigating the incident. She goes into detail about Scientology getting Masterson to pay her $400,000 to settle the issue and prevent her from speaking out, essentially buying her silence. Because as many former Scientologists have stated, Scientology was protecting itself. Scientology clearly confirmed that what Gen B stated Danny Masterson did happen, because according to over a dozen former Scientologists, there is no way they would have made Masterson, a celebrity in high standing with Scientology, pay $400,000 to another Scientologist who had made these claims. They would only do so if they were true, if their investigation revealed that that's what happened. She also discussed losing her family and how her life was destroyed. Masterson involved her 9-year-old daughter, which we discussed earlier, and he also put aside some money for her daughter to get help via Scientology because of how his actions affected the child. Jane Doe 1 was also very good friends with Lisa Marie Presley, and she told Lisa about the attack back after it happened. Masterson actually threatened Jane Doe 1 and told her, "You're not going to tell Lisa about this," as Lisa Marie Presley was of course a famous Scientologist and the daughter of Elvis and Priscilla Presley. Lisa Marie was born into Scientology as her mum joined Scientology after her father's death. Lisa Marie left Scientology in 2014, although since 2008 she had been experiencing growing discontent with Scientology. Lisa Marie Presley was going to testify in the trial on behalf of Jane Doe 1, but sadly passed away before she could. After being found guilty, Danny Masterson was immediately handcuffed and remanded into custody. His family went straight to work in getting letters for Masterson and to try and sway the judge into leniency. They were trying to sway the judge into letting Danny serve his 2 sentences concurrently, which would mean if he was sentenced to 15 years for each, he would serve the sentences at the same time, and he would get out in 15 years. The alternative is to run the sentences consecutively, and Masterson would serve one 15-year sentence followed by another 15-year sentence, making his sentence 30 years behind bars for both guilty verdicts. But much more on this later, because a lot of people have been falsely reporting what his sentence ended up being. Masterson's family themselves wrote letters and sought out prominent Scientologists and other celebrities. In the end, over 50 letters were sent to the judge, filled with glowing statements about Masterson. These letters were written by all of Danny's siblings, Chris, Jordan, Alana, and Will, but there are many other celebrities who wrote letters. One quick thing before we get into the Ashton and Mila of the whole thing is I wanted to briefly mention here Danny Masterson's brother Chris, as I wasn't quite sure where else to put it, but Chris Masterson also has a terrible, terrible reputation in Hollywood, and there's a lot of stories that circulate about him and how he treats women, especially in his relationship with Danny's co-star Laura Prepon, who, as we know, ended up converting to Scientology, but she has actually ended up leaving Scientology. She did an interview in 2019 that she had left over 5 years ago, but there's always been a lot of rumors about Chris just treating Laura awfully. Of the people who wrote letters, Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis were absolutely the most famous, but there was also letters written by Deborah Jo Rupp and Kurtwood Smith, who were 2 actors from That 70s Show, who played Mr. and Mrs. Foreman. Giovanni Ribisi, who was in Avatar. He also has known Danny since he was a child. He wrote a letter. Billy Baldwin, whose wife is sisters with Bijou Phillips, Danny Masterson's wife. He wrote a letter. I do also believe that there was another actor that wrote a letter, but when there was some backlash recently for another trial about celebrities writing letter, I believe this actor pulled his letter out, and I will explain why. But this actor is Ethan Suplee. Danny Masterson has quite a relationship with him, and he's always getting him into projects because he's someone that Danny wants to put in a lot of shows and things like that. Like when he was on the ranch and Danny got fired from the ranch, he wanted Ethan Suplee to stay on as he was able to still recruit for Scientology.
Fellas, hey, careful. So bad you're heard the police chase. Oh shit. No, fuck this. You're taking me too. Yeah, me too. I mean, I guess I can. They don't really care who goes in that direction.
Ethan Suplee was in My Name is Earl and Varsity Blues is probably what most people would know him from. It seems obvious that he originally penned a letter because there's court documents that actually have small excerpts of his letter. They're just little quotes from them. And then whenever you go to the actual packet that contains all the letters, there is no letter from Ethan Suplee. So it seems as though either last minute or maybe he found out the letters were going to be released, or he asked his lawyer about it and he ended up pulling his letter. It seems as though when Danny Masterson's lawyers went to people to ask them to write these letters, they had originally requested that the judge enter these letters under seal, which is what they probably told people, which means the public would never have been able to see the letters, but the judge refused to enter them under seal. So when Danny Masterson's lawyer and Masterson were obtaining the letters, they were likely telling people, oh, don't worry, we're entering it under seal, not knowing that the judge was going to deny that. And obviously most people took their word for it, which is wild that they didn't check with their own lawyers or PR people. And it's especially wild that people like Ashton and Mila didn't check with their own lawyers and PR people, because people like Ashton and Mila, they have so many lawyers and PR people that are working for them already. So it's just wild that they wouldn't have even sent an email or had a meeting and asked them about sending letters and if they were going to come out.
But Danny and his friends and his family and the Scientologists have a lot of blackmail on Ashton. And I'm not even, I can't sit before you and say, oh, they threatened him. I don't think they threatened him. Ashton is 2 peas in a pod with Dick. And I gotta say, in a vacuum, I agree with you. You can't really blame a guy for wanting to, help throw his friend a little bit of a bone. But that's in a vacuum. If I'm Ashton Kutcher, I'm like, come on. You think me writing a nice letter to the judge is gonna have an impact? I'm not touching this with a 10-foot pole. The problem is, the attorneys, to the best of my understanding and to the best of my knowledge, the attorneys basically gave all these people false confidence that their letters would never see the light of day. And honestly, if I'm Ashton and I think that's true, okay, fine, I might send a letter. If one of my best friend's family is begging me to do it, and I think it's never gonna see the light of day, I might do it. But I don't know, man. It's like, that is rolling the dice. Like, you really think this letter's never going to see the light of day? But here's how I know that they thought that. I was in the courtroom for the sentence, and the judge basically gave a little speech to the defense attorneys. He's like, I received your motion, filed it under seal, but we're not accepting it under seal. I've already told you, almost nothing in my courtroom for some personal safety reasons. And so for the attorneys to file it under seal like that, I mean, they told everyone that's what was going to happen, and everyone's like, oh great, it'll never see the light of day.
If you'd like to read the entire letter that Mila and Ashton wrote, they wrote one each individually, then I've linked them down below, and I definitely recommend you read them just to get an idea of what they said. But we're going to discuss those letters a lot more after I discuss the sentencing, because the sentencing happened, and then obviously the letters were released to the public, and that's when everything went crazy for Ashton and Mila. But we will discuss Ashton and Mila a lot after the sentencing. Despite all the letter writing, Danny Masterson was sentenced to life in prison.
Wow, he got life in prison? I had no idea.
A lot of people have been reporting this sentence as 30 years, but it's only when he becomes eligible for parole. There's no guarantee.
Wow, life in prison.
So he technically got 50
I didn't know how
years
this went.
without parole to life.
My head has been in the
Jane Doe
sand.
1 and Jane Doe 2. The letters were hoping his sentence again would run consecutively rather than concurrently. So
Wow.
if he gets paroled, the first time he will ever be eligible, he will be in his 70s. That's best case scenario. But
That guy went to
he could
jail
go
for
and ask
life.
to be
I had
paroled,
no
and
idea.
be denied 15
Wow.
times, and he could never get out of prison. But he can't even ask for 30 years.
Nope.
When the letters were released, Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis took an absolute battering on social media. A key point I don't see mentioned a lot is the fact that Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis wrote these letters after Danny Masterson had been found guilty. Most people, including a number of ex-Scientologists, have said that Ashton Kutcher especially probably wrote these letters because of how much dirt Scientology has on him. Both Mila and Ashton threw their reputations away when these letters were released, as they have constantly claimed to be on the side of victims, when these letters showed they were the absolute opposite of what they were claiming. The words chosen in these letters, especially by Ashton, are so carefully chosen to try and contradict the victims' stories. They made constant reference to Danny being so against drugs and being around anyone that did drugs, whenever that is one of the things he was accused of, was drugging his victims.
And probably someone on the Scientology side of the team put together a framework for what notes everyone should be hitting in their letters. And that's why almost all the letters talk about Danny was so against drugs. Danny was so against drugs. It's a weird thing to be mentioned in 50 letters.
Yeah, it was very repetitive at times. It was.
And the problem with mentioning that, and because in Ashton's video, he's like, it wasn't meant to undermine the testimony of the Jane Does. I'm sorry, part of the entire case is that Danny drugged all these women. And you're gonna write a letter, Danny hated drugs. Danny didn't want to be friends with people who took drugs. That's a total lie. Jimmy DeBello was one of Ashton and Danny's closest friends.
All these Hollywood
He's an
people love
absolute avid
drugs.
mind cokehead all the time. Like,
Like, the fact that he wouldn't even associate with people who took drugs is not true. Mila Kunis herself, when she was with Macaulay Culkin, was on a mountain of drugs. I've heard so many stories from people who
I don't know
at parties
Macaulay
at
and
Manson's house and this place.
dated.
I mean, insane. So you have Mila, who herself has been a close friend of Danny for 20 plus years or whatever, who's taken tons of drugs, being, oh, Danny would never associate with anyone who took drugs. Like, they're lying in their letters. And I think that's one of the reasons he's taking so much flack, is it was so over the top. It was so over the top and stacked with lies. Yeah.
Mila and Ashton also know all of the women, especially Ashton. He has had a close relationship with the women.
Yes.
Who he knew extremely well. And it's been reported upon that when
218
Ashton
fuel for
Kutcher
some
found
reason.
out
I'll
about
take it.
the accusations against Masterson, particularly the Chrissy Bixler one, that Ashton's response was that bitch. After the backlash on social media, Ashton and Mila released a response in the form of a video, and I'm sure anyone who watches The Boys found this quite comical, as last season Ashton and Mila were in an episode of The Boys and played themselves in a spoof of celebrities all singing Imagine on social media and just kind of taking the piss out of celebrities and their idiocy online sometimes, and yet here they find themselves in idiocy online for their own terrible actions. Ashton and Mila picked the exact same spot in their house to shoot the apology video that they shot the little recorded video for The Boys, which probably was the only location in their house that didn't show off their enormous mansion, so they probably wanted to keep it low-key for an apology video.
These supervillain attacks, they've affected everyone. Doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. We're all in this together. And together, we can imagine a better world. Imagine there's no heaven. Imagine all the people.
If Ashton and Mila thought the letters were bad, they made things 10 times worse with the apology video.
We are aware of the pain.
Why did you have to mangle John
by
Lennon?
the character letters that we wrote on behalf of Danny Masterson.
Fucking idiots.
We support victims. We have done this historically through our work and will continue to do so in the future.
A couple months ago, Danny and Sony reached out to us and they asked us to write character letters to represent the person that we knew for 25 years, so that the judge could take that into full consideration relative to the sentencing.
The letters were not written to question the legitimacy of the judicial system or the validity of the jury's ruling.
They were intended for the judge to read, and not to undermine the testimony of the victims or re-traumatize them in any way. We would never want to do that. And we're sorry if that has taken place.
Our heart goes out to every single person who's ever been a victim of sexual assault, sexual abuse, or rape.
The video was
No, they
received
just had a friend who was a
horrendously, and
rapist.
the
I think we've all
entire
probably had a friend
video
who's
had a very
been a
hollow
rapist.
feel to it. They didn't say anything about the
How would you
actual
know
victims.
about that stuff?
They say in the video that they believe victims in general, which obviously isn't true based on their actions. And they also ended the video with a very generic.
I had a
"Our
dear
heart
friend.
goes out," and
He was a statutory rapist.
of the say, but it really would have made the world of difference.
He was
if they
19.
had
He slept with a
actually just
14-year-old.
Spoken to either the three women by calling them their names, Jen,
They
Nisha,
busted
and
him, too.
Chrissy, as they
The
were
parents
identified
insisted on it.
themselves in the media by this time. It would have made a
Ruined
lot of
his
difference
life.
if they just said, "We're sorry that we hurt Jen, Nisha, and Chrissy," and of course we would believe them. When this was all going on, Chrissy Bixler put out 2 stories on her Instagram. One was directed at Ashton and one was directed at Mila. In Mila's story, she says that she believes Mila was put through some terrible things on the set of that 70s show, and she also references an incident in Toronto that involved Mila and Danny Masterson. Nobody seems to know what this incident was, but judging by how Chrissy phrased it, it seems to have been something horrendous. The story directed at Ashton called Ashton out for being just as sick as his mentor, Danny Masterson. Chrissy referenced an incident she knew about
Oh, I'm
as
full.
she was
Oops.
dating Danny at the time. This is way back 25 years ago. Ashton Kutcher was picking up his date, Ashley Elleron, to go to an Emmys after party, and Ashton Kutcher claims he was running late, and when he got to Ashley's house, he knocked on the door, got no answer, tried to open the door, couldn't get in, looked through the window, saw what he thought was red wine stains on the floor, and left. Ashley, unfortunately, was the victim of the Hollywood Ripper, and he had taken her life that night. That was why she didn't answer the door.
What really happened is Ashton Kutcher showed up to the house to pick Ashley Elleron up for her date. He opened the door. He walked into the house. You could not see the body on the floor from the entryway to the house. He walked into the house. He looked over to the area where he saw her body lying on the floor.
Docking
She
permission
stabbed like
requested.
47 times, covered in blood, freaked out, left the house, and for about the next hour sat in his car outside the house calling various members of his team for advice on
Docking
what
request
the hell
accepted.
to do. And his team advised him that he should not call the police. He should not be the one to report this. It should not be known that he was there. He doesn't want to be the one who discovered the body. That 70s show was only a couple years old at this point. Ashton Kutcher was not a household name. They essentially said, this is all you'll be known for. People will think you did it, all this kind of stuff. This will be what people think of when they think of Ashton Kutcher. You don't want that. Go to the party. Go to the party that you were picking Ashley up to take her with you to. Go to the party and then go home. Now, I'm not making any representations that these are the exact words that were spoken. I'm not even naming the members of Ashton's team that he called. There's someone else that he called, Danny Masterson. He called frickin' Danny Masterson. That's how close these guys were. In fact, the night before Ashley was killed, Ashton and Danny and some other people from that 70s show were hanging out at Ashley's house.
Over the years, Ashton has definitely had a very, very good PR team, and they have been able to put him out as a kind of himbo in the early and mid 2000s, and now he's been transformed into this investor in startups like Airbnb, Uber, and WeWork. And if you want to know how problematic WeWork is, there are a ton of videos about WeWork and its founder on my channel, and Kutcher even features in some of them.
I'm going to watch a lot of
Kutcher
her
is
stuff,
also
I
now
think.
the founder of a non-profit called Thorn, which he claims helps find child predators, and that's what I want to talk about first.
We hunt child
And
molesters.
discuss
It
more
sounds so
the
weird. It sounds like a
sketchy
paladin
Ashton Kutcher
bullshit.
stories,
Sounds like
science
paladin
fiction
bullshit
ties,
to me.
all the old interviews.
I hate
and a lot of
paladins. I
Hollywood
hate zealots.
rumors that have existed about Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis.
Like, I respect their
So
cause,
Thorn was originally started
but
by Kutcher and
like, I don't know, man, like actively hunting people. I mean, I did that once, and it was almost the worst mistake I ever made. I actively hunted a police officer who raped a friend of mine. And, actively hunting people, leave that up to them. That's their job. Let the cops do it. You know? Damn it, I can't see my fucking mouse. Can't see my mouse to do anything. It's so annoying.
Moore, who were married at the time. When Ashton Kutcher and Demi Moore divorced, Kutcher changed the name of the
Why did you marry
foundation
Demi
as It was
Moore?
originally called DNA Foundation, which stood for Demi and Ashton Foundation, and they changed the name, obviously, to Thorn. Ashton Kutcher treated Demi Moore terribly. If you want to know more about that, I would
Wow.
really suggest reading Demi Moore's book. When
Of
it comes
course.
to Thorn, in a nutshell, it sounds great, right? The software is supposed to take regular people's photos in places, scan them, and try and compare them to images that child pedos take and share. So it's supposed to then be able to compare the two, and then you're able to locate where the picture of the child was taken, so that then they can go and save the child and arrest the predator. But Thorn is a lot more complicated than that. I could do a video just on Thorn itself because the rabbit hole is very deep, but but I don't want to get too sidetracked in this video. It's definitely not what it is painting itself to be in the press. I've linked a very good article on it below. It does have a paywall, but the link that I have used, you should be able to read it for free. And again, if it's something that you want me to cover, let me know in the comments. The fact that Ashton Kutcher is the face of it is also seemingly counterproductive. I mean, this may be conspiracy time. Is that on purpose, as if it's so distracting that an A-list celebrity, maybe former A-list after what's happened with Danny Masterson, but people really get drawn in by the whole celebrity thing. Even the European Data Protection Supervisor, Wojciech Raporowski, was even last month quoted as saying, whilst one can be a movie star to advocate a good cause, it is a thorny problem when stakeholders hide behind the notion of civil society, therefore misleading the public, even if unintentionally. The last thing I will say about Thorn is that in 2021, Thorn raised $18 million. They ended up using 14 million of those dollars to pay employees. There are about a dozen people in Thorn that make over 6 figures, and
What?
I also am sharing on the screen the 2021 990
Oh
filing,
my
so you can
god.
see
They used a child molester hunting campaign as their like celebrity fucking yeah, no, I knew I didn't like these people. I just didn't understand why, and I think it's because I'm usually a pretty good judge of character, and yeah, this bullshit is just insane. It's like, so they had a child molester hunting campaign running that was like a donation charity that they were literally using as like a money laundering plant to pay their friends 6-figure salaries, probably to sit around and do nothing.
seems
Now,
a
it's
lot
their
when you're
money.
working in a charity.
It's their money. They can do what they want with it.
And again, it's just something that I wanted to draw your attention to. So let me know what you think about that down in the comments. So now we're moving into our little Hollywood gossip section. This, obviously, I don't have any black and white proof that most of this stuff is true. So most of it is alleged. If you want a lot of Ashton Kutcher dirt regarding relationships, diva behavior, I would go and listen to the podcast Beyond the Blinds. Episode 62 is an Ashton Kutcher one, and they also have episodes on Masterson, Wilder Valderrama, and a lot of other people. There have always been a lot of questionable stories about Ashton Kutcher, and the company he keeps certainly doesn't help with that. Mainly Danny Masterson and Wilmer Valderrama. Many of the past interviews have been brought up again after the letter apology controversy, and I have played some of those previously, like the Rosie O'Donnell one, and I'll put a few more in here as well.
Only do I get to work with our beautiful, sexy, hot next guest on that 70s show. But I'm lucky enough to play her boyfriend, so I can make out with her. Okay, a very talented, hot, smart, and beautiful Mila Kunis.
So I know I went to semi-formal with a friend of mine, so that was kind of like my prom.
Sure.
So then after work on a Friday, Danny Masterson, who plays Hyde, we went to a club, like him and the whole cast, and everybody went to the club.
Old enough to get in?
Okay, and
Wow.
my name and my ideas, I'm not, but the person is. My parents know it's okay.
Young Hollywood.
So here's my story. So Danny was my first dance, and that was my prom. It was at Club Blue. I think that's what it was.
Okay.
On Hollywood, and that was my prom night.
Exciting story.
It was
Now, can I get pictures of your graduation?
Free movie,
cheaper by the dozen. She's one of the girls that we're all waiting for to turn 18, along with the Olsen twins.
What? Who the fuck talks like that? I don't think he wrote that either.
Hi, I'm Ashton Kutcher, and I'm from that 70 Show TV, that 70 Show too. And the reason I'm doing this is not because I think an increase is good, but because Josh told me to be able to sit on my lap and like.
with Nikki that you could play Yambo if you're under. He was under like 5'3" and he was like 110 or something. But I don't know. If you're only 17, I don't know if you can play Yambo.
No problem. I
Yeah.
can lie and say I'm 18. That make you feel better?
Are you gonna? Okay, listen. I gotta mention this. Is this big for you?
Oh.
This is the stuff magazine.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy posing?
Thanks.
Huh?
Did I enjoy posing?
What'd you tell him? You're gonna be 25 pretty soon.
Okay,
Come on.
Ashton Kutcher has a huge pattern of cheating. Pretty much every woman he's been with, from Brittany Murphy, Taryn Manning, Lindsay Lohan, January Jones, these are obviously based on reports and blind items. Ashton Kutcher allegedly had a one-night stand with Lindsay Lohan before she was 18, and then after that, that's when she started dating Wilder Valderrama. When it comes to Mila Kunis, again, I think there was a lot of inappropriate stuff on set, and the fact that she was a literal child when she was cast, there's probably a lot of stuff that she went through on that 70s show set, because I cannot imagine with Danny Masterson, Wilmer Valderrama, and Ashton Kutcher, they all have terrible reputations, and also that 70s show has a reputation for being a cast and a behind the scenes atmosphere that was just party, drinking, and drugs, even though apparently Danny Masterson has never touched a drug in his life. I think a lot of people were really let down by Ashton and Mila, and Mila in particular, because she's always come across very well on camera, so unless you really dig, you don't see a lot of the reports about her behavior behind the scenes. And she even just last year did a movie called Luckiest Girl Alive that's on Netflix, where the main character that she played was R-worded multiple times at a party in high school, and Mila was playing the grown-up version of her in her late 30s, and she was still dealing with the trauma of that event many years later. She also produced that movie, and she spoke out in a lot of interviews about how this was something that was really important to talk about, and how a lot of women had gone through this sort of thing. And then just to see this letter, it just kind of negates everything that she said.
I'm very curious now how much they knew about him. Did they know all of this? Because they don't seem necessarily surprised, and they seemed more than willing to write these glowing letters that seem like fucking 5-star Yelp reviews of this guy. Even with all of this evidence of the sexual abuse, they're still calling him an outstanding role model, an older brother figure. Holy shit. I understand they've been friends for 2 decades, so I guess when Danny Masterson's family reached out to request that they write a letter, gushing grannies over how cool Danny Masterson is, they should have said no. They should have just hard rejected that on the spot. Of course, I'm not a lawyer, I haven't passed the bar, but I don't think this is some kind of obligation they had to fulfill here, because there were other people that didn't write letters about Danny Masterson. But let's assume they were forced to. You can still say, I was one of Danny Masterson's best friends, I didn't know this side of him, I didn't know he was an evil person, so I don't feel comfortable saying anything nice about my experience with him. Full stop. That could just be the end of it.
A couple months ago, Danny's family reached out to us and they asked us to write character letters to represent the person that we knew for 25 years, so that the judge could take that into full consideration relative to the sentencing.
How rotted and corrupt is the brain of a Hollywood drone? A Hollywood fucking clout zombie. I can't even begin to try and process how their noodles work. How can you just say that so nonchalant, like it's not a big deal and not just fucking diabolical? They knowingly wrote these character letters to give the judge a full understanding of the situation to consider when giving his sentencing to Danny Masterson. So they knew that this was going to be used to try and get lighter sentencing for a man who committed heinous crimes. How do you sleep at night like that? After doing that, I don't get it. A lot of people wrote letters, of course, it's not just these two, but these two are the most public figures about it. But I imagine they called anyone that ever even crossed Danny Masterson's path, hey, it's me.
Kunis and Kutcher really destroyed their relationship with the public. Ashton Kutcher has now stepped down as the chairman of Thorn over the entire controversy. I'd love to know what their relationship is like with Danny Masterson now, if they're still standing by him. I'm sure they are, because they wrote letters after he been convicted
Scientology.
of this horrendous crime.
Fucking
So I can't
Scientology,
imagine
man.
if it didn't hit them then, that why would it hit them now? But something that it did hit recently was their wallet, because a lot of people won't watch their stuff anymore. But what I'm particularly referencing is the fact that Danny Masterson has cost them millions of dollars recently. When it came to the negotiations of that 70s show's streaming rights, all the streaming giants were going back and forth to purchase all 8 seasons of that 70s show. When a show is sold like this to streaming, or usually it's for syndication on those channels like TBS, TNT, the stars of the show, the writers, directors, all these people get a payout. And especially people like Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis, who were on the show, well, nearly the entire time, Mila certainly was, they would be netting millions of dollars, especially for a 200 episode show. They would be getting likely tens of millions of dollars. But when everything started coming out about Danny Masterson, it all fell through, because obviously no streaming giant are going to want to be the company that's paying tens of millions of dollars to Danny Masterson when he's on trial for the crimes he's on trial for. So it was completely dropped, and that's why there isn't a streaming service that has that 70s show. Again, they both, Ashton and Mila, had great PR. And I think if you polled most general people, most general audiences who go to the movies and watch popular TV, most, especially fellow millennials, would have said they liked Ashton Kutcher and certainly Mila Kunis. Sure,
I like Mila
there have always
Kunis,
been rumors about both of their diva behavior and both
but
of
I
their
don't like what
cheating, and
Scientology
Ashton
did to
Kutcher
them.
had a terrible reputation when it came to women, but most people either didn't know that or weren't too bothered
Didn't
by
care.
it because they liked their movies.
He's a
and
rap
their
hack. That's
shows.
kind of what
But
they
now they are
expect from those
absolutely
guys.
ruined. Sure,
They're all like
some
Marilyn
people will
Manson
still
rapists.
watch their movies and
That's fucked up.
shows, and people who aren't really on the internet a lot won't know about most of this stuff, so they'll continue.
It's
And
not
of course,
rape
they're
per se. It's
obviously
rape. Danny Masterson was a rapist, but a lot of this is about sexual assault, and that's kind of the Marilyn Manson Hollywood age thing now. Is they were all sexually assaulting each other. It's fucked up.
super loaded.
I feel bad for the
but there
women in that whole bit.
are many, many, many people who are absolutely done with them. I think Christina Ricci summed it up really well after everything kicked off with Ashton and Mila. Christina Ricci came out with a great story that kind of surmised everything, and she is so problem free, never gets involved, very low key, but she's seen everything. She's been in the industry since she was a child, so it is particularly, I think, strong that she's come out and said this. So Christina Ricci's story said, "So sometimes people we loved and admired do horrible things. They might not do these things to us, and we only know who they were to us, but that doesn't mean they didn't do the horrible things. And to discredit the abused is a crime. People we know as started coming out about Danny Masterson, 70 fellow millennials would have said when it came to women, but most people either didn't know that or were now they are shows, so they'll continue. And of course, they're obviously super rich, super low with them. I think Christina Ricci summed it up really well after everything kicked off with Ashton and Mila. Christina Ricci came out with a great story that kind of surmised everything, and she is so problem free, never gets involved, very low key, but she's seen everything. She's been in the industry since she was a child, so it is particularly, I think, strong that she's come out and said this. So Christina Ricci's story
Comedians
said,
and actors
"So
are
sometimes
fucking
people we loved
crazy,
and admired do
crazy
horrible
people.
things. They might not do these things to us, and
They
we
scare
only
me,
know
frankly.
who they were to us, but that doesn't mean they didn't do the horrible things. And to discredit the abused is a crime. People we know as awesome guys can be predators and abusers. It's tough to accept, but we have to. If we say we support victims, women, children, men, boys, then we must be able to take this stance. Unfortunately, I've known a lot of awesome guys who were lovely to me, but have been proven to be abusers privately.
Yep.
I've also had personal
Me
experience
too.
with this. Believe victims. It's not easy to come forward. It's not easy to get a conviction. Over the course of the investigation and the trial, even more women came forward claiming they were victims of Danny Masterson. At the time of this recording, there's over 17 women who have come forward in some form, and if
Her
that's the
accent
amount
is
of
odd.
people who have come forward,
It sounds like a Brit who moved to America at a young age.
how many victims there are out there. The majority of these women who've gone into any detail about what happened to them have eerily similar stories to one another.
Because she sounds
and
American.
also
She
to
sounds
the
LA.
those who were in the trial.
She sounds
Couple that
internet.
Together with
Internet.
the fact that the jury heard everything, heard all the evidence, and they not only convicted him once, but convicted him twice. Of course, the Church of Scientology has claimed that this whole thing is being orchestrated by Leah Remini for her show and just for attention, and it just factually cannot be true, because when even the three Jane Does, never mind anyone else, first reported their crimes to Scientology, Leah Remini was still a Scientologist, and there would have to be some either crazy time travel, or this would have had to have been some massively orchestrated thing that goes back 20 years, and Leah Remini would have had to have been pretending the whole time too, because she really hasn't been out of Scientology that long. She was in Scientology for nearly her entire life. There's still an ongoing civil trial, and that was
I like the Leah
paused
Remini
while
thing.
the
It was
criminal
so
trial
good.
was taking place. So now that that
I don't
has
like the
happened,
Scientology
sentencing
church.
has happened, the civil trial
Cult.
will go forward. The civil trial isn't actually anything to do with the criminal trial and the actual accusations that the Jane Does had. A lot of people think civil trial, oh, they're just using whatever happened in the criminal trial and trying to get money, but that's actually not the case at all. The civil trial is against Danny Masterson and the Church of Scientology, and it's for all the harassment that has occurred over the past 7 years. Because if you remember, they have been enduring all of this harassment from Scientology since 2017, when Chrissy Bixler came forward along with another woman, and they spoke to Leah Remini and they interviewed her on Scientology in the Aftermath. They weren't allowed to actually air that episode until 2019, but everything did start in 2017, and Scientology has done some truly awful things to them. They make their lives hell. They're following them constantly. They've killed multiple pets, and it's just abhorrent behavior. Of
Sorry,
course,
it's not
we'll have
funny.
to see how things turn out.
What is with
for Ashton
Scientology
Kutcher
and
Mila
pets?
Kunis. Everything is still very fresh, and Ashton Kutcher has obviously just stepped down from Thorn, so we'll see what happens to them. I really think they have done irreparable damage to their reputations, but it just depends how many people really are aware of this and how many people stay staunch in their convictions about not supporting any of their projects after this whole thing. I am thinking about maybe doing a video on the cast of that 70s show as a whole, because some of the stuff that I found out over the course of doing research for this video is absolutely wild. I couldn't fit all the Danny Masterson things in this video, otherwise it would be
Yeah,
like 5
I think the
hours
story
long.
goes really
I could
deep.
do
Yeah,
maybe a part
deeper
2
than
with the
this.
civil trial and include some of that stuff, but there is a lot of also
I had
awful
no
stuff
idea.
out there about a lot of the cast members of that show. So if it's something you're interested in, let me know down below. But there is still a lot to come for this case. And just as I was getting to the end of my research, I mean, the research takes up primarily most of my time with these videos. It's the editing and recording is a small part compared to that. But there was something that happened that made a lot of people go, hang on a minute. Because Danny Masterson and Bijou Phillips announced last month that they are going to divorce. And a lot of people straight away thought, oh, this is him shielding assets, shielding cash, and that certainly could be the case. I think we're
Oh
gonna be
shit,
able to
startled me.
pretty
What's up,
much
number
figure
2?
out quite
How you
quickly
doing?
if that is the case, if they're doing it just to, you know, stop lots of money
Good to
being
see ya.
taken off him and assets, or if it is actually just they're getting
I am
divorced,
making a road.
and maybe there was like a deal that she stayed with him or he stayed with her.
And I'm learning about how Danny Masterson is a rapist, and I didn't know.
She stayed with him until the end of the trial. But basically, if we see a very quick divorce, then I think that will point towards, oh, this is just for saving face and saving money. Because if it gets all drawn out and it's complicated, that means that it's probably for real. So I'll definitely be keeping an eye on what's going on.
I had no idea that stuff was even going on. I mean, it was a good show, and I like a lot of the people on the show, but they turned out to be a Scientology shill cult, like rape circle. And I think that's a valid reason to dislike them.
It is very important to point out, though, that he has kind of already done this, or at least started to shield assets and real estate and things like that, because when he was first accused, like way back in 2017, 2018, 2019, he actually transferred a lot of real estate and other little stakes in businesses he had to Bree Schaefer. And I'm sure you'll remember from the trial chapter that Bree Schaefer...
Yeah, I wanted to like Hyde the best because Hyde, I thought, was the one that was most realistic. I didn't think Kelso was a common character in America. Although, I think, there is always the handsome dude in high school that gets all the play or whatever. And there was kind of like a, what's that movie? Dazed and Confused, sort of like, like aspect to Kelso that I thought was realistic and stuff, but I think Eric and Donna were perfect for their roles, and those are both actors I really respect, though I think Topher Grace was kind of like a little bit more difficult for me to appreciate than Laura Prepon was, and I think she killed it in Orange is New Black. And I love that show. And so, although I can only watch it once. Prison stuff, I can only watch once. It's something about I can't live there. I only watched Oz once. I only watched Orange is the New Black once. Prison stuff, it's hard to do. I think it's a culture that's really interesting to people who sit in jail all the time. But it's hard for me to do, Yeah, I remember that 90s kid. Yeah, and so like, and then okay, the parents were amazing. Red and the old lady. I forget her name. The old lady is one of the greatest actresses alive. If she's still alive, she was wonderful. The parents were wonderful. Everybody was good in that show. Red and Kitty were fucking dope. Yeah, and but and Hyde was the one I wanted to like the most because he was the one who had the acid. He was the one who was on weed all the time. He has sunglasses when he was. I wore sunglasses when I was a kid, not brown ones like the 70s ones that he wore, but I wore sunglasses a lot of the time. I wore like big black glasses that blocked my eyes and stuff if it was daylight and I was out of the schoolroom or the whatever, because I wore sunglasses a lot like him. I was the cool guy who wore sunglasses all the time because I was stoned all the time. And, and so I wanted to relate to Hyde, but I never have and never will like Danny Masterson. And this is something I knew long before I figured out he was a rapist today. I've never really liked Danny Masterson at all. Of those actors, I didn't like, the only ones I liked were Laura Prepon and Mia Kunis. The guys on the show actually kind of bothered me a little bit, but that's my own personal. I'm not saying they weren't really good actors and that it wasn't a good show. And the parents I really liked a lot. But, but like a lot of that cast kind of bothered me, and then it turned out a bunch of them were Scientologist rape cult people, which is just fucking crazy. That dude, Danny Masterson, went to jail for life. I didn't even know that until like 10 minutes ago. I had no fucking idea that guy went to jail for life. That's just fucking Hyde went to jail for life. That's insane to me. Hyde is a character that they've done a lot. I think Hyde was a metaphor for Hunter S. Thompson, I think. Because Hunter S. Thompson would wear the glasses and he was stoned all the time and he was a 70s idol like that. And so Hyde was a stab at trying to get Hunter's whole legacy into that 70s show. And I've seen this a couple of times. Like they definitely have done 70s characters like Hyde before a lot. It's kind of a stereotype in television shows. And so as far as Danny Masterson portraying Hyde well, I think Danny Masterson was a good Hyde, and I don't think that his sexual misconduct later in his life necessarily made Hyde a bad character, and I'm not sure he was a rapist when he recorded Hyde, you know? I doubt he was a full-blown rapist until later. I doubt he was ever a rapist when he was on that show. I think they were watching them too closely. I think the Rat Pack stuff came later, and that's just how I feel about this. Like, I don't know. You know what it reminds me of is fucking, oh God, what's his name? Something K. Like, so the Ren and Stimpy guy, John K or whatever, Ren and Stimpy creator, was a groomer, pederast, child molester. I watched a bunch of videos about him because that one was hard for me to stomach. I think I maybe even have done that. Yeah, John K, right? John K was a Nickelodeon television producer in the age of Nickelodeon television producers being pederasts. And he, like, was famous for having, like, a 13-year-old wife and shit, and this ruined Ren and Stimpy for me. And on top of it, they really tried to defend this guy, protect him, hide him. They tried to resurrect the show. They tried to make him famous again. They tried to put him on Spike. And that's all that shit about that 70 show cast members, like, writing letters in trying to defend. Now, that was due to the Scientology church, but, like, Hollywood protects rapists the way that, like, the church protects rapists. And this sucks a little bit. They protected this guy. They protected a lot of Nickelodeon producers, and it sucks. But it turns out that a lot of the times when somebody is like a television producer, it's because they're a pederast, and this sucks. This sucks, but it's a fact of life. It's disgusting. It's like they go to where the kids are. It's disgusting.
Actress, and she's married to Michael Pena too, who is from the Ant-Man movie. I'm sure a lot of people know his face. And
nope.
She used to be Danny Masterson's assistant, and she was very well known to the Jane Does, and it very much allegedly seems as though Bree Schaefer was quite involved in all the Danny Masterson thing and all the cleanup and things like that, because she is extremely loyal to him and has been, you know, either working for him or involved in some way with him for over 25 years. There's a lot of places that Danny has assets that are known, so I can't imagine the ones that are unknown. You know, he had a lot of investments in real estate. A lot of that has been transferred to Bree Schaefer. He even had a lot of money in a PokerStars account, which I could tell you for a fact back in the day. So I hope they're looking into all sorts of poker accounts, because he was a really
he's a
good
gambler
player, and certainly when it's been allowed to be played online again, I'm sure he's gone straight back to it. He also owned a stake in Card Magazine, which is a poker magazine. So all things like that. There's lots of investments too in Bitcoin and, you know, all those Ashton Kutcher sort of Uber and things. I'm sure he's got involved in some of those. So it will be really interesting to see what happens to all of that and how it's divided up in the divorce, and then to see what happens with the civil trial. Hi guys, editing Ash and editing G here.
She's cute. I'd date her.
I was just literally finishing the editing of this video, and there's news. So apparently Aaron Smith-Levin reported this. Danny Masterson has been declared a suppressive person, which, if you know anything about Scientology, you know that's a really big deal. If someone is declared a suppressive person, all Scientologists are supposed to
excommunication.
Which Danny Masterson's entire family, his mom,
church,
his siblings,
everybody,
his wife, his kids, kid, they are all Scientologists. And for example,
Oh
his two
my
younger
God.
siblings, Alana and Jordan, their dad was declared a suppressive person, and they cut him off, changed their last name from his to Masterson,
Oh
and never
my
spoke to him
God.
again. So if that is what's going to happen with Danny, it's going to be very interesting to see how it all plays out, because you look at someone like Tom Cruise. When Katie Holmes was declared, Tom had nothing to do with Surrey after that because she is entangled with Katie, who is a suppressive person. So
Oh my God, let's go look at that. Oh my God, I had no idea. Okay, so let's sort by filters because I don't know these people and I don't care about their weird like TMZ lives, but oh my God, but it's a podcast that's 48 minutes long. That's probably where she got this information. Son of a bitch. Yeah, no, but I mean, yeah, like how long is this though? It's long. It's long. Okay, this will probably be good.
How did Katie Holmes leave Tom Cruise?
Oh, it's this dude again, Aaron Smith Levin or whatever. Yeah, okay, subscribe. Sure, I guess. I think I'd rather have like a more reputable source. I don't know. Leah Ramini is the reputable source on this, so we'll go to her.
Hey, Heather has.
Oh, Leah Ramini, thank you. Thank you for the next content from a stream. I'd like to sub to your channel. Oof.
A question.
Sorry.
She was wondering why people like Nicole Kidman and Katie Holmes do not speak out against Scientology publicly. Now, Mike, I'm sure you have some insight as to why. And this is, by the way, from your experience in Scientology, but also you were the head of the so-called legal department in Scientology called OSA.
Right.
And how would you typically, or Scientology typically, deal with celebrities and wives of celebrities in Scientology, or husbands of celebrities? I mean,
You know, it's weird. When I hear this woman, when I see this woman, I think top Hollywood star with a lot of success and deserved and you know, all this stuff. But when I hear her voice, I hear drunk heroin barfly. Kind of like Janis Joplin, a little bit. Joni Mitchell when she was older. And it's odd because when it doesn't fit the image. You see the image? She's got this Oprah image, but when she talks, I hear Steve-O. I literally hear Steve-O. I hear heroin and alcohol and years of drug abuse.
these are celebrities themselves.
You can hear it in her voice. It's there. It's there.
In their own right.
Right.
But how would this? Why have?
Also, she's calm and born, which is fine. But usually with celebrities, you have usually some pedigree, some money, some training, something like that. She strikes me as like middle class, like me.
Or Katie Holmes, in your opinion, not spoken.
And that's weird for Hollywood. I mean, I'm saying it doesn't happen. It's just weird for Hollywood. It's uncommon. Usually they're pedigreed.
I think primarily,
and that's fine when they're not. I'm just saying.
Agreement was made in their divorce from Tom.
Like show horses. That's their whole deal.
A part of
they have pedigree.
Agreement and
Hollywood
would include not speaking publicly about Scientology.
Yeah.
Or not speaking negatively.
So this is the podcast episode that she got a lot of this information from. So it's funny that I came look for the source and I found her source. I didn't come looking for the source. I came looking on a side note, but I found her source, and that's cool. I wanted to know what the source was.
Might be.
Leah's a good
and
source.
He probably paid
I would
a lot
say.
of money for that to be included, and I think that because both. I mean, and this is an interesting thing. I think that probably at the point that those divorces happened, they were both of a mindset of, I just want out of this thing. I just want to be done with it. I don't want to have anything more to do with this. You know, we both know the level of intrusive invasion into the lives and marriages of Tom Cruise's wives Scientology presented.
Right.
They had spies in their households, and all of the staff were reporting to Miscavige, and not all of them, but staff members in the household would report to Miscavige. They were all hand-picked and verified to be Scientologists in good standing. And I imagine that at the point where they decided that they no longer wanted to be a part of the marriage, they didn't want to have anything to do with Scientology anymore either.
Right.
And likely being the sort of people that they are, they just feel like they made a commitment in an agreement, and that they're going to stick to their commitment. And I believe that there is a secondary point with respect particularly to Katie, which is their daughter. I mean, she has custody of Suri, and Tom is apparently not part of their life whatsoever, and she is probably very happy to keep it that way.
Right, and that's because Katie now is considered a suppressive person, an enemy to Scientology, because she left Tom, you know, the messiah of Scientology.
Correct. And so is Nicole. Nicole
Right.
is considered a suppressive person too, and in fact there's a lot of stories that Marty Rathbun told about how he was tasked with the job of getting Connor and Bella to understand that their mother was a suppressive person and that they shouldn't have anything to do with her. And that indoctrination, brainwashing, seems to have succeeded pretty well. So I would guess that they're sort of happy to not say anything because it keeps their lives peaceful and in the status quo. And of course, Nicole is happily remarried and has 2 beautiful children, and Katie is getting on with her life with her daughter. And, you know, I can understand if I was them, I wouldn't say a peep either, probably.
Okay, so, Wynn Skinner, how Scientology saving the Earth. I hear how they are selling self-improvement. Well, to be simple, they aren't. All right. What exactly is the job in the Sea Org? This is from Leah.
There's a few people that actually ask that question. Like the next one also from Karen says, what does a workaday consist of in the Sea Org? You talk about these 8 a.m. to 12 a.m. days, but what does that mean? Are you reading documents, taking calls? What does an actual day look like?
Yeah, Mike, what does a day in the Sea Org look like? I mean, I could tell you from my end what it was, but yours is probably much more exciting.
Well, depends. I mean, cleaning rooms is pretty exciting, Leah.
I loved it. I mean, I didn't love being in the Sea Org, but I you know, at 12 years old, you know,
is depleted.
Being virtually unsupervised, and not going to school was amazing. Cleaning, not the biggest fan of that at 12, 13, but you know, I felt like a big shot. You know what I mean? Like, look at me, I have a job.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, go ahead.
Know.
Yeah.
Well, to answer this question is first of all, you have to understand that the Sea Org has people that do everything from Scientology auditing and supervising training to fundraising to printing books and making TV shows to cleaning offices and
hotel rooms. Public Scientologists.
Beg your pardon?
I'm explaining, like, you know, in the Sea Org, you would clean rooms for the public Scientologists who were visiting a Scientology hotel.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So there is a wide variety of activities. There is also a bunch of administrative, busy work that gets done in Scientology, and there are a lot of people who are part of what's called quote-unquote management in Scientology, and that means that they are responsible for overseeing, supervising, and directing the activities of individual Scientology organizations around the world. And those people engage in massive bureaucratic paper shuffling. It is astonishing the amount of paper that Scientology generates, because Hubbard Hubbard wrote a bunch of policy and organizational instructions for Scientology that talk about how the files are to be kept. And back in the days of when he was writing these, the 50s and 60s, that meant like literally carbon paper copies of things. And the policy letters, or the directives from Hubbard that lay out how Scientology is to be administered, all talk about paper files. So there are huge numbers of paper files and copies of reports and reports on reports and reports about reports, and people spend hours and hours and hours filing these things carefully in manila file folders, and it's like every organization is also required to report each week to the international management their statistics, and that means they have a whole series like of 150 different measurements of their activities for the week that they have to report on. And I mean like down to the number of letters that came in, the number of letters they sent out, the number of bills that got paid, how much money got spent, how much money got made, how many auditing hours and sessions there were, etc., etc. Like 150 of them. And these all come in and they're all graphed, and then Hubbard had this extensive body of quote technology on how you analyze these numbers so that you can then direct these organizations on how to expand. And this is a massive organization that accomplishes literally nothing. In other words, Scientology is not expanding, and yet there is this sort of monolithic management structure consisting of Sea Org members who sit around all day every day from 8 in the morning until midnight or after, doing all of these things that Hubbard said you're supposed to do to help expand organizations, and none of them work. So that's what I mean. It's a lot of busy work. They're not accomplishing anything, though they think that they are helping these organizations to grow and thus are accomplishing the aim of Scientology, or the goal of clearing the planet.
Right. And listen, people, I think it's a great question because, and a great answer. I just think like people need to understand the way the Scientology is run. Buildings are run by Sea Org members. So there's Scientology Sea Org members who are posted as gardeners. There are Scientology Sea Org members who are posted as chefs and waiters, and but they work solely for Scientology organizations. They live at Scientology organizations. They live in dorms. They do this 7 days a week, 365. They sign billionaire contracts, so they're there for the rest of their lives while making $50 a week. And that's basically, and it's morning, noon, and night. There's no real family time. You have no outside friends, no outside family, really. You wake up at 7 o'clock and you work until midnight, and you sacrifice your life thinking that you are doing the work of, of a saint. I mean, basically, you think you're sacrificing your life because Scientology is making the planet a better place. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I just picked out while we were talking a few other questions that relate to the Sea Org, and I think we should stick on this topic for a bit.
Sure.
Like, been thinking about this a lot this last week. Who are the security force of the Sea Org? Like, are these guys are like militia? Are they all Talon? Are they Scientologists and true believers? They sound very scary.
Talon being the security, what is Talon?
Talon is the name of the company run by a guy called Ron Williams, who are private investigators. They are not Scientologists or Sea Org members, and they are the people who look after David Miscavige's personal security when he does events. They're the guys that were up at Arrowhead when I went up there